Welcome to the Ken Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
Hey guys, what's happening?
We're going to talk really into the microphone this time because we are traveling on the road, so to try to make it a little bit clearer and better.
Please let us know if this helps. We did take your suggestions from last week.
So we had a really fun weekend. I had some friends in town.
It was really nice for me to have your friends in town.
I don't know. They were a lot. They were running all around.
Danille can be needy, and
What?
so when her friends are here, she's less needy.
Well, we're coming to you from the road, so if you guys have any technical difficulties, please let us know. Just understand that, we're just in this house in Idaho, so we might not have the same studio set up as we normally have.
Yeah, we're trying. So keep let us know. We're trying to deliver. We are studying like crazy. We're just in a different spot.
Right. So to start, oh my gosh, I just blanked out.
Well,
I
I'm used to this.
So anyways, to start, let's get on with our Twitter questions of the week. We're going to be talking about how rents are skyrocketing, which is not yet.
Okay. What is it?
Well, Jerry hasn't put it up. Okay. If you were to win $10 million in the lottery, which option would you prefer when it comes to receiving the money? A, receive the entire sum at once, or B, receive it in the form of yearly deposits of $1 million over a period of 10 years. All right, so that's an interesting question that you posed there. We always talk about this.
Well, because I heard this on the radio. Like I heard, actually it's not an original idea, but I heard it from a DJ talking, and they did it to a bunch of listeners, and I was like, these people are idiots.
Why? What were they saying?
Well, because all of them wanted the lump sum.
Well, some people on our Twitter answers
I
might
know,
but
but I'm like, it's so obvious to me. But so we should probably let people say.
All right, let's see what our answers are first. So Stretch said option A, lump sum. Because option B would not only suffer from higher inflation, but also higher taxes in the future. Then when I want to buy the assets, they'll be even more expensive.
Yeah.
So, all right, next one. Jerry must be on a delay.
Oh.
A, because inflation will reduce the value of what you can buy every year, and the money will be invested into assets that generate an additional income.
So here's the way I looked at it.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit different question. So one was a lump sum or a certain amount over a period of time. So it was a little bit different. But the way I look at it is if I had $10 million and I just put them in 1 month T-bills, that's all, then that would make me over 5% on the 10 million. So 10% of 10 million is 1 million. So you would make $500,000 of interest expense, or I guess to the bank, interest income to you, a year. So you would never touch the 10. So you would never have to use.
So
the
you
10.
would take the lump sum and put it into T-bills.
Yeah. So that was option A, right? So because I can invest that money at north of 5%. So I guess the way I would look at it is I never would actually have to, I would never have to use my principal. That's the whole point.
It depends how good you are with money, though, because some people blow it, so they would be better off getting annual deposits.
That's exactly what this is all about, actually.
Yeah.
Is how good are you with being able to make money on your money.
Well, and also how good are you not spending all of your money?
Right, and so that's why I would figure out a way to take the 10 million and have enough interest income, whatever it was, to be able to cover all my living expenses. So I never touched the 10. The other thing is, of course, as somebody mentioned, is that you would want to put that 10 into something. So let's say a 10 could buy you a $40 million asset. So 10 million would be your down payment, 30 million would be debt. You would want to make sure you have enough passive income. But then you're going to get the appreciation on the 40. So if there's and you get all tax benefits and all that kind of stuff. So you're preserving your 10 by growing the 40s, let's say to 50 or to 60, and that's basically what our model is.
Yeah.
So that's another way to do it. It doesn't have to be in 1 month T-bills, but I would love to start with 10. And you know, of course, you wouldn't want to put it in one deal either. You'd want to probably split it over, you know, 6 or 8 or 10 deals.
True. And you just love the lottery.
Well, you know, we didn't get into the tax side of it, you know, but I personally would take the lump sum instead of the reoccurring payment over a 20-year period for the same thing that people said. But on the radio, when I was listening to this, the people all they wanted the certainty of the money every year.
Right.
So I was like, no, you know, because I'm like, well, what if inflation in 20 years eats away 100% of your principal? At 5%, that's actually what it would be.
Right.
20 years at 5% is 100%. So the money that you would have made and you would have gotten in that, say, 19th or 20th year is
worth a lot less.
Well, it's the same amount, but it just buys half.
Right. Although when you have so much money, it's not a big deal.
That's right.
But anyways, so we're going to jump in. But before we do, just a couple general housekeeping things. I have my webinar coming up. Jerry, go ahead and put that on the screen. Guess we have delays.
It's okay.
Okay. So it's July 19th. We're going to do it at noon. Normally we do these in the evening, but we're going to try to do them midday for some of you if that works out better.
I've seen this look before, by the way.
It's mistakes people make when buying a house or a rental. Really important if you're considering buying a rental property. Really important even if you're considering buying a home for you to live in. So make sure you tune in. It's free. Jerry, can you put it in the comments, the link? It's just kenmcelroy.com/webinar. All right. So I guess it's /webinars, plural.
Yeah, let's jump right in.
Let's jump into the topic.
I like this.
Yep.
Can't wait to hear what people have to say.
Well,
this is a big topic right now.
yeah, and make sure you comment if you've seen rent skyrocketing, because I think that a lot of people, most areas kind of have. Make sure we're talking into this. So what have you seen in your business?
Well, I think if you take a look at what the news is saying, they're saying that rents have backed off, and you know what they're really saying is they've gone from 10% per year, which is not healthy, to 3% per year, which is still healthy. So you know, again, you got to be careful of the way that what they say and how they say it. We're not seeing negative rent growth. Now, there are a couple exceptions. Obviously, if you live in downtown Seattle or downtown San Francisco or downtown Chicago, you're going to see problems because there are people moving out of those areas for a number of reasons. We won't go down the political avenues today, but generally, what we're seeing is people are moving and they're migrating to other areas, which is creating pressure on those areas. So if like I was just up visiting my mom, who lives north of Seattle in a place called Everett, Washington. I was there 3 days ago, and I was like, wow, there's a lot more traffic in Everett because people are moving north because it's more affordable and it's a little bit safer. So they're not necessarily moving out of Washington, they're just moving out of Seattle. And also Washington State has grown for whatever reason. I can't figure that one out. But this is where I grew up, but it's putting pressure on that market, as you would. More people and with the existing infrastructure is going to drive prices up. Think about everything. The restaurants are going to be harder to get into. The schools are going to be harder to get into. The rents are going to go up. The house prices are going to go up if there's not more being built. So whenever you add supply to anything, anywhere, it's going to drive things up. That's what's happening in areas of Texas, in Florida, North Carolina, Tennessee, Arizona, and of course, probably in many cities near you. So that's what happens is a lot of times these realtors or people, they say, rents are, things are just fine in my area. It might be true, but it might not necessarily be true in a market in a proximity that's nearby.
Nice. John from YouTube said that he's 7 miles east of LA and has went up 5% this year, and he's expected to go up 2.5% next year.
Yeah, that is solid. I mean, if you think about it, if 5% per year over 10 years, that means your rent's going to go up 50%. So as a landlord, that's very good. Where can you get that kind of growth? And so that's going to produce very well. On the other side of that, of course, are your operating expenses, which are also going up.
Yes, they are.
Property taxes and insurance and utilities and labor. And, I was, one of the things that was interesting is that my mom, she decided that she wanted to go into this home where there's 120 other people there about her age. So she goes to bingo and I did Wii bowling, by the way, last week, and exercise classes and social and all that kind of stuff. But I asked the GM, what's going on, with you? What's going on with this property? He said, we're struggling with food costs, we're struggling with labor costs, we're struggling with utility costs. So the expenses are going up in these areas as well. So you can't forget about that. So the 5% of rent growth does sound great, and more than likely it's covering the expense increases. But you got to look at both.
So what's the average that rent would go up pre-pandemic?
So, my whole career for rent growth, we always were looking at 2 to 3% per year. So that I would consider to be healthy. So flat, of course, is not healthy because expenses are also going up. So you're going to want to kind of move, just above expenses, right? And you're going to want the tenants to pay off whatever it is you own. That's the whole model. The tenants pay off your mortgages, and so you are gaining more equity because they're paying down your mortgages. And so you're going to want to make sure that your expenses are not growing faster than your income. So I'll give you a couple examples. In Oregon, they put rent caps. In St. Paul, I think it's Minnesota. So a lot of municipalities are looking at rent control, rent caps, those kinds of things, because rents are out of control in some areas and have been over the years. And so these tenant advocate groups are getting together, and they're starting to try to get rid of or introduce rent control in these areas. So that's something that you have to watch. At the same token, you're also seeing property taxes go up, insurance costs go up, utility go up, payroll go up, materials go up. So the cost of a dishwasher or the cost of a stove, those are all higher. So all that stuff creeps its way onto the expense side. So as a landlord, you want to make sure that you're not capped on the income. So if your expenses are going up 4 or 5% in a year, which is probable, and you're capped at 3, that means that you're losing value because your expenses are rising faster than your income. So that's why you have to look at the whole picture.
But if you do have the rents going up, because I'm not everybody watching owns anything, right? So a lot of these people are renters too.
Let's put it into a simpler form. Let's talk about something that we own. Mm-hmm. Okay, so an HOA at a property. Let's say you buy a property and your rents are $2,000 and your mortgage is $1,000, and you have your other expenses. You have your landscaper, you have your utilities, you have your HOA costs. Guaranteed, the HOAs across this country are experiencing higher costs. Their landscaper that they use to maintain the community, that's higher. The utilities, that's higher. The maintaining of the roads, the tree trimming, all that kind of stuff is higher. All of that's higher, okay? So they're all dealing with that right now. So as they take a look at their annual budgets, and they had let's say the HOA fees were, let's say $200 last year, they might go to $220 or $225. That's an extra 10, 15%, let's say. So they're going to put out these increases in the HOA fees to cover those common area expenses. So same thing is, anything that you're going to be doing at your whatever it is that you own is going up. That's kind of the point. on a much smaller basis.
Yeah, and there's some specific reasons rents are skyrocketing too that we want to go over.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. We can talk about that too. Rents. You think about the reason rents go up. The primary reason is because there's not enough housing. That's it. There's more people than there is housing. So that's actually when you really start to see very, very high rent growth. The other thing that happened in 2008, think about this, is when we had a bunch of people fall out of the single family housing market. Where did they go? If you owned a home and all of a sudden the home was worth less than the mortgage, they called it jingle mail. You would mail the keys back to the lender would take it. So all that stuff happened in 08, 9, 10, let's say. Many of you probably went through this. Those people, what did they do? They moved to rentals, right? So that put pressure on rentals, which is what helped create a lot of this rental growth that we just had. So what the offset of that is more supply. So, or when people leave. So we've had situations where, like a university leaves, or a big employer, like Boeing left Seattle. It left a big hole there because a lot of employees also moved with it. So military bases, those kinds of things happen locally.
Yes. So we're going to go over 7 reasons today that the rents are going up and why they're so high.
Looks like I jumped.
Ken is just jumping all over, but we're going to do the 7 reasons. So the first reason that he spoke about that we're talking about is there's just not enough rentals. So he just kind of went into that where you have people that are, having to rent longer. You're having people that can't afford to buy a house. So you're just having, not enough supply. And that's the general consensus. Something that's really contributed to this, though, has been the Airbnbs. Yeah. So Airbnbs have majorly affected just normal rental prices.
It's saturated now, as you guys know. Well, there's a couple things happening. One, everybody jumped on the Airbnb wagon because, of course, it's profitable. If you can get $100 to $200 to $300 per night, which is what a lot of people are getting, even more, then why wouldn't you? If you could keep that thing rented for 10, 15, 20 nights a year. So really profitable as compared to a normal rent, which is typically significantly less. Mm-hmm. So that's taken a lot of housing out of the market that would either be long-term or even short-term regular rent.
Absolutely. And I think though that when you're looking at that, some of the Airbnbs are starting to come back into the market, which is going to help rental prices in certain vacation areas. Think Florida, think Phoenix. But yeah, right now it definitely has limited how many rentals we have.
That's right.
But the second thing are houses are so expensive.
They are. They're not coming down because of if you've got a mortgage that was 3% a year or two ago, you're not leaving. Period. It's called trapped equity. So those people are not going to move. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't move because if they moved into the exact same home today, their mortgage payment would be nearly double. So why would they do that? They're not really. Most people move for a certain reason. It's a lot of times they're upgrading. Well, they're not going to be upgrading anytime soon because the cost, the interest rates are so much higher. But a lot of people that we've found is that they're selling because they perceive this to be the top of the market, whether it's true or not, and they're scooping that equity, and they're using that for alternative lifestyles, and they're going other places, and they're renting or they're traveling, and so we're seeing a lot of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so when the houses are expensive, to Ken's point though, people aren't moving and people also can't afford houses, right? So you have your standard, 26, 27, 28-year-old that would normally buy a condo or buy a house, and now they're continuing to rent. So they're taking up that supply, and then you still have your 19, 20, 21 year olds still coming in wanting to rent. And as you can see, this is going to create a scenario where you're not having enough supply, and a big factor in that is people not being able to afford to buy.
Yeah, so you guys want to solve a big problem and make a lot of money, figure out a way to provide entry-level housing or affordable housing. If you can figure that out in your local marketplace, you will be just fine, because that is the biggest problem facing the United States right now.
Michael Shane called the fact that people can't sell their home because they're in such a low rate as golden handcuffs.
Yeah, yes.
So I like that. Now the third reason really gets back into the second reason, but it's because that rates are so high. So people typically, during COVID, you had high home prices and low rates, so people were being able to buy houses. But now, your standard interest rate, if you have good credit, is about 7%. And that's, over double what it was during COVID. And so you still have high prices and you have high interest rates. And I was kind of looking, and in Phoenix, the average starter home or the average home is about $520,000. And that payment after the $26,000 down payment is going to be about $3,500 a month, plus your taxes, insurance, HOA. So you're probably looking at like over $4,000 a month. And there's just not a lot of people that can just swing that, especially those that are 27, 28, looking to buy a first-time home.
That's right, and that's actually the problem with the system as it is you're supposed to have all kinds of types of housing, including entry-level housing. So the affordable housing or that entry-level housing, if you can solve that problem, that's why tiny homes are such a big deal right now. That's why reducing square footage is such a big deal. That's why people are buying these RVs and doing all these different kinds of things, because in a lot of markets it's cheaper to rent than to buy. A lot of markets. In some markets it's not, but in a lot of markets it's cheaper to rent than to buy.
Yeah, and Chrissy said, I desperately want to leave my house, but trapped equity is holding me captive.
Yep.
The only thing I could think to do is shovel all the extra cash into the house to reduce the need for financing. And that's a big deal. I mean, if you think about it, say you want to upgrade your home or even keep the same home, you're looking at doubling your mortgage payment almost at this point.
Well, in a weird way, that's kind of what happened to us. We were building a home, and the cost to build the home went up so much, it almost doubled.
And the interest rate.
Yeah, and then you have that, and then you had the interest rate that went from like 3 to over 6. All of a sudden, I'm like, let's just put a couple $100,000 into our existing home, and rent it, because I built that house. It's like 13, 14 years old. So that's what we're actually having done right now.
We decided to hold off on building, not sell our home, stay in our current home for the time being, just because building costs are up, rates are up, everything's so much more expensive. We would be like tripling our mortgage payment just to move.
And I'm locked at a 2.8 or something, and I hardly have any loan left on my house because I've owned it so long. But the point is we could afford it. There's no question, I could afford it. But I remember when I looked at the mortgage payment on the new house, it was like somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 a month or something. It's some crazy number.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I'd rather just stay where we are and just kind of wait it out.
Exactly. And people are mentioning modular homes and different things, in the chat, and those are great. But the problem is one, cities adapting to that. Typically, their home has to be a certain size. But two is the land is expensive. Everything's expensive. So unless you're going to live in the middle of nowhere and own a home and get plumbing there and electric and everything else, it's going to still be very expensive.
Yeah. And I'm not, modular homes, I have a lot of people getting into mobile home parks right now. Mm-hmm. So that is a business that's on fire as a result of affordability. When rates are low and housing prices are low, nobody's going to be pouring themselves into modular homes or mobile home parks.
Absolutely. And for those asking some questions on the chat, we're going to do that here in a little bit. So just hold tight and I'll get to your questions in a little while. John's asking a good question, though, that I'm going to get to now. He said, Ken, can you remember a time when rates doubled in a short period like we had happen in the past couple of years?
No.
I wonder how this uncharted territory will affect the real estate market.
Yeah, it's a really good question. This is the fastest the Fed has ever increased rates. Just go back and look and you'll see. It's just in the history. So we've never seen them increase this fast at all, ever. It's certainly tampering inflation, which is what they were trying to do, which is good. Although I don't know whether we're going to see prices come down.
Right.
And that's kind of the next problem. We still have a housing shortage. We still have a rental shortage. So all of those are still going to be opportunities. The question is one of the reasons that we haven't bought in the last year is, does it cash flow? So as you guys know, I don't buy anything and hope that it goes up. I want it to go up, but I always make sure that it cash flows, because if it goes down, which did happen to me in Austin in the mid 2000s, the cash flow or the renters actually covered me. So it didn't really matter what the price of the property was, even though obviously we buy things for them to go up. But if that's your total game, then you could be in trouble. And I think that's what's happening with a lot of these office buildings and multifamily syndicators and stuff. They all thought that things were going to go up. They haven't. Multifamily is down at least 20 to 40%, depending on where it is. Same with office buildings. Same with most of commercial real estate.
Absolutely. And the fourth reason that rents are going up right now that people don't like to talk about is immigration.
Yeah.
So you're migrating people into different communities, and obviously those people need a place to live.
That's right. That's a political hot potato, I know, for a lot of people. But the reality is, it just goes back to supply again. Period. So when you have more people coming in, and immigration it's not a new thing. If you take a look, it's always been a percentage of the U.S. population's growth every year. So it is what it is, and they are always going somewhere. And so that puts additional supply on all of those things we mentioned. The grocery stores and the school systems. In fact, you were working with a group out of the Philippines.
Yep.
Right? And what was their biggest issue was the school system.
Yeah, the school system.
Yeah. Were they on a bus line?
Mm-hmm.
And what was the best school system in the area? It actually would have been the difference of them coming here or not.
Yeah, and where they wanted to live.
Traveling nurses, right?
Yeah.
So, so you got, these are real things. These are real people taking real rentals and actually single family homes and office space. All that stuff that immigration is a real deal. So you got to watch that and see where they're coming in. Which ones are legal, which ones are illegal, because that actually can make a difference as well, and pay attention to it.
Absolutely. And the fifth reason that rents are going up, and people are going to get so angry when I say this, is that it's because people can afford it. Because if they couldn't afford it, they wouldn't be at the rates they're at now. So we get a lot of people commenting saying, people can't afford rent, this is crazy, like they have to come down. But the truth is it's a supply and demand industry, and people are paying it. Now, they are doing things to make it work. Like a lot of people are rooming together, kids are living with their parents, moms are moving in with, their son or daughters to make it work, but they are making it work. And something George Gammon mentioned to us is a lot of that younger generation likes having roommates. They like to have roommates even if they don't have to have roommates, because they just like that community more than, some of the older generation that wants to live alone.
Yeah, well, I think we have, as Americans, have been very spoiled on size as well. So as you travel around to other countries, Asia, Europe, wherever it might be, I've been to Russia a few times, you're talking about small places. A lot of those are very, very small micro apartments. They're used to basically sleep, cook, and clean up in the morning. And so we've been a little spoiled that way, where a lot of times we get these big, like my son has a 1,200 square foot 1-bedroom or 2-bedroom for himself, and he just had a roommate move in, because he's like, yeah, I wanted somebody that he knew, and they just wanted somebody with him. I think some of the best things to look at is going to be Hawaii, New York, as an example. You take a look at Hawaii is probably the greatest example. Honolulu specifically, it's very expensive there, and you'll have up to 3 generations living in one place. So grandfather, parent and kids or grandkids. So those all could be living in one spot. Very common in many countries where family stays together. In the U.S., I believe part of our entire problem as a country is that the family unit is a little broken. There's been over the history, people wanted to move out and have their own thing. They're very segregated. So this is not a bad thing, but it is going to happen. You're going to have to start seeing doubling up.
Yeah, and it's just going to become more of a norm. It's been the norm, like you were saying, in the bigger cities. It's just going to become the norm everywhere.
Right.
The 6th reason rents are going up is wealthier renters are relocating. So, you have people that lived in LA, lived in Seattle, lived in New York City, relocating to places like Idaho, Arizona, Texas, Florida, and they're used to paying these very high rent prices, so they feel like they're getting a steal.
And for houses too, like the house that I had here in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. On the left, San Francisco. Person on the right, San Francisco. Person bought my house, San Francisco. All 3 on one street. One of the most expensive streets in Coeur d'Alene, called Lakeshore Drive, and it's like California moved in along the lake. So not only there, but also on the rent side as well, because you think about what they're moving out of. These are, several $1 million homes, even 10s and 15s. I think I looked to see the buyer of my house. They sold their house, I think it was somewhere in the 15 to 20 range in San Francisco with a view of the Golden Gate Bridge, and they bought our house. So, for them, it was like a steal. So you are seeing a little bit of that.
Yeah, and the last reason that we have rents going up is work from home. So I know that all the fully remote work is kind of dying down a little bit, but there's a ton of hybrid work. And so when people need that second office, they're going to need a bigger place, and they're also getting stipends from their employer a lot of the time to work from home.
Yeah, I think this is a big deal. Obviously we all know we all got sent home and work from home then. Then some employers are saying we want you in the office full time. And there's been a pushback on that by many employees, and so there's this kind of hybrid model evolving, whatever that is. So I know in our company, we want it to be about 3 days a week in the office, because we also believe that the corporate culture needs that. But then we allow them to work from home as well. So what that means is that the home now is becoming more and more of a place of work, where it was never really that before. So that's happening in the apartments, and of course in the long term. So that's also part of the decision on where people are and where they're going to be.
Yeah, I just had a conversation with a client this morning. He's trying to start podcasting and doing that kind of stuff, and he's working out of his bedroom. So he now is looking for a bigger space where he can have like a bookcase and a green screen and just some things in the back that look more professional.
Right. Yeah, so that's all happening, and it's here to stay for a while, guys. Probably forever.
Yeah.
I guess.
So I want to hop into some of these questions. Actually, we had a really good one on YouTube to start. And if for those of you watching, liking the content, make sure you hit the like button. That really helps us get this content out in front of everybody. So it says, Ken says interest rates are driving the price of real estate, but now rates are high that the price is not going down. Can you explain?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a lot of times you got to break real estate up because it's not one category. So let me explain. You got condos, you got entry-level housing, you got mid-level, you got custom housing. That's just one, that's single family only. Then you got retail, you got industrial, you got office, you got mall, you got multifamily. And of course you got different levels there. So real estate is one huge category. So let's just shift on the commercial real estate side first. So if something's $10 million and rates were 3%, the cash flow on those apartments, let's say, were a lot more when the rates were 3% than they are at 6%. So the buyer is going to pay less because, again, they're solving the cash flow. So if you're truly buying real estate for cash flow, the cost of debt, because it went up, is going to drive down your cash flow, and so you're going to offer less. And so that's what's happening on the commercial real estate side, is that because cash flow's less, buyers are offering less. And sellers are now having to come to grips with whatever they had a year ago, say that $10 million property, they might have to sell it for $7 in order to meet the needs of the buyer's cash flow. So either the buyer passes or the seller decides not to sell, but at the end of the day, it's repriced real estate on commercial. On the single family side, of course, what's happening is you're pushing more people into rentals because the prices went up and they can't afford the mortgage because the price of the mortgage went up. So now that's defaulting people into rentals. That's putting more pressure in multifamily. So to your point, the other thing that's happening is that there's not a lot being added. And because rates have jumped, people have that trapped equity. So there's not a lot of new supply hitting the market. So the one thing that offsets single family is supply or listings or inventory. So because if you have a 3% loan on something that was $500,000 that you bought 2 years ago, you're not listing that property anytime soon. So now you have a lack of supply coming from the single family side. That's why single family prices are holding their own right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that commercial buyers, it's a business, right? So it's all about, the interest, the debt, minus the cash flow and it profiting, right?
Right.
And so when you get into residential, it's all about what people can afford.
Correct.
And then what's available.
Right, and or if they're Airbnb or renting, like Danille just bought another house, and the biggest indicator on the house was the interest rate.
Yeah.
Period. Because the rent is the rent. The market sets rent.
Yeah.
So she's not gonna be able to charge more than market rent. So the market rent is whatever it is, and so she had to work the price and the interest rate to back in to make sure that she cash flowed. So that's why that works that way. And so that's why you're not seeing the run in these prices. It's because somebody like Danille, who's buying it for a rental, like a business, it has to cash flow.
And the other thing, when people are buying residential, that supply and demand, and there's emotion around it too, and so I just think that those are just two separate markets, and how they move is going to be very different from one another.
I would agree.
So now we're going to get into our Inner Circle questions. If you're not a member yet, please sign up, kensinnercircle.com. It is $30 a month. You get access to Ken. We do happy hours, lunch and learns, lunch with the experts, and we answer all your questions either on air or by email.
Right.
All right. So Chad is asking, on a previous podcast, you mentioned selling off non-cash flowing properties. When you make this determination, how far do you look back? 6 months, 1 year, etc.? I have a long-term mindset now, and I look at my portfolio as a whole, and it remains profitable because I don't have just one property. But I've not yet to figure out when a property becomes a toxic asset and I need to get rid of it.
That's a good question. Yeah, really good question. Yeah, so I did say that in a couple of videos. So here's a great example. I had a 68-unit building that I owned in Phoenix. Now, 68 units is a tough size because it requires a couple people to run it, 2 to 3 at the most. So the labor costs and the cost to run that property with the debt and the interest rate that I had on it, it was really producing a very small amount of cash flow. And so I found myself really digging into the operating expenses and trying to figure out, do I shut down like on the weekends when everybody's looking for rentals, and when's the office closed, when it's not closed. And so operationally, I was being challenged, even with all my experience as a property management. I was being challenged being able to squeeze the most amount out of that property based on what the rents were and the expenses. And so yet I had a tremendous amount of equity in the property. So what I decided to do was list it, because I had, I can't remember exactly, maybe 4 or 5 million of equity in that property. but I figured I could actually take that equity and put it into something that produced more. And that was the point. And so we ended up doing a 1031 exchange, so I didn't have to pay tax, into something else that actually cash flowed more. So that's what I'm talking about. Obviously, if it's negative and you're feeding something each and every month, then it's actually more of a problem. And or if it's a vacant piece of land, land right now is highly priced. So we own some land that we bought. It's probably worth what, $4 or $5 million, I guess, on a vacant piece of land that where we were going to build our house. So it's not producing any income, but it's a heck of a piece of land. I'm probably going to build a house on it, so I'll keep it. So there's another example of a non-producing asset that I decided to keep because one, I don't need the money, but also we're going to probably live on that land because it's 3 acres in the middle of an area called Paradise Valley. So I think that you have to look at each one independently and individually. So we have billboards, as you guys know. So some of my billboards produce a tremendous amount of cash flow, and some are a little less. And so you have to just take a look at, the other thing is, what are you going to do with that? So if you're making a little bit and you can't move it into something else, you always got to look down line. You know, what is it that you can move that money into, and can you do better with it? So in the case of our land, I don't think I can get a better piece of land for us to build a house. To what am I going to do with that money? You know, literally, we made a lot. We have to pay a capital gain on it, and of course, right now, as you guys know, we're challenged with being able to reinvest it right now at these higher rates. So we're going to stay as is. So you just have to look at each one individually.
So Nick wants to know, it's the next question from our Inner Circle members, is do you see residential real estate prices going down in 2025? I know that's like a far way away, so it's hard to determine, but.
Yeah, I actually don't. And the reason is because we have a supply problem. And also, it's apparent to me that if somebody's going to build something today, that the cost to build it is still high and the interest rates are high. So let's don't forget, if the Fed does raise rates a quarter point in the next 2 meetings, which they said they're going to do, but they may or may not, that that means that we're not going to see any rate cuts. Okay. Now, if they raise them a quarter point for the next 2, that also means that if and when they decide to cut, they're not going to cut 1 or 2%. They're going to cut a quarter or a half, let's say, and it's going to happen over a long period of time. So we're in this higher interest rate game for at least 2 years, in my opinion, because they're not going to you think about over the 11 rate increases, what is it, a year plus, right? So if they're that aggressive on the way down, which I don't think they will be, it's going to be another year and a half before you still see the impact of that. So, you know, we're looking at, for now, you're not going to see low rents or no low rates by the end of 2024. Mm-hmm. And so, what that's going to do, it's going to slow down new construction, and it's going to be a problem, because what's really needed to offset all of this is supply. That's actually what's needed.
Absolutely. And so Kai, our next question from our Inner Circle member, he said, suppose you were offered an opportunity to buy a large anchor store attached to a declining mall location. Would you buy it?
No.
Okay. Explain.
Oh my gosh, guys, well, first of all, you have to look at the demographic. If you are going to buy a big anchor store, they're dying on the vine. So just think of Kmart, think of Sears, think of Macy's, think of JCPenney. What's happening in that world right now? I don't know what kind of store it is, but we went the other day. I went shooting up in Idaho here with about 8 or 10 guys. It was really fun. We went to a outfitter, and they had taken over an old Macy's and, blowing this thing out. It was awesome. It was huge. But I also said, it's funny because you can buy any of the stuff and have it delivered to your door at 5 o'clock. you know. And so, you know, there's habits have changed. Just ask your friends when's the last time they went to a mall, and why. So I'm not saying that but I remember the analogy is my parents used to read the newspaper. How many people read the newspaper today? So, you know, and then I remember when they used to read books, now they read ebooks. Or I remember when we used to do travel agents. So, you know, you gotta pay attention to the processional effects of what's happening, and people are going to continue to order things that they want. These malls are starting to be repurposed, which is good. And so if I were you, I would buy the mall and not the department store in the mall.
A lot of people are, you know, commenting that, you know, they understand that it's important to buy cash flowing properties, but it's very hard to find something that cash flows right now.
It is.
So if home prices are going to be more expensive in a couple years, what are they going to do?
Well, you have to just keep looking. I mean, you know, real estate. Listen, I mean, Danille's been buying real estate for 10 years, and what do you have, 5? Mm-hmm. So
the last one I just bought, though, is very, very, very tight, potentially even a little negative,
right.
Depending.
Yeah.
So
this is a great time. It's a great question. I understand the frustration behind it all, but trust me, you always want to make sure cash flows. You want a backup plan. What's killing people right now in the Airbnb space is that they can't strip out the furniture and rent it long term because it doesn't cash flow.
right.
That's the problem. People are overpaying right now, and they're starting to figure out new ways. So house prices jumped up, and they didn't cash flow with a regular renter. So that, oh, who cares? We'll just Airbnb it. Well, now that Airbnb's soft, now they're negative because they can't put a renter in there to cover. So that's what's happening. Be careful of doing those kinds of strategies. I'm not saying it won't work. I have friends doing this right now. I have friends that have master rented, to a lot of these social service agencies. They're, and I know many self-storage businesses are doing very well. RV parks are doing very well. Multifamily in most areas are doing very well. And if you can step into owner financing, which is certainly happens a lot on the commercial real estate side, that's another great example. And I'm not saying you can't do land development either. So if prices go up and you have a piece of land and you're able to build for less than they are on existing, you're going to do really well there too. So, I know it's frustrated. Part of it is just seeing the whole landscape and keeping an open mind. I'm still looking at billboards because billboards, every municipality hates billboards. Like nobody likes them because they stick up and they're obnoxious. But I love them because they cash flow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, people had mentioned online, putting more than 20% down can help something cash flow. So if you save up more and you take more time and you have more money, that could be helpful. I also know that, trying to do the sub 2 deal, like Pace Morby teaches,
Yep.
if you can find one of those, pocket listings are good. If you can find something that's not being advertised to anybody through like a wholesaler or something like that. So you just got to get a little bit creative. Obviously jumping on Zillow or wherever you find your housing leads every day and checking cash flow, because the things that cash flow, they do go in a day because there's tons of investors out there like us trying to get them. So it's just really important, to just be on top of everything and look at all your different avenues, put down more if you have to. The truth is with inflation, home prices are going to probably continue to go up because of the supply and demand issue. Now, Gerald asked a question that was really interesting, and he asked if rents ever go down, because people are very worried about, you buy something, it's barely cash flowing, and then rents go down because of the recession. So do rents typically go down in a recession?
Oh, I've seen rents go down. Now, I don't know if the recession makes the reason for rents to go down. In my situations, when rents have gone down, it's been population has moved away. Mm-hmm. That's the number one thing. So how has that happened? For me, I've had military bases nearby deploy as one thing. I've had universities move. literally relocate or consolidate. Big regional offices move, like State Farm or Boeing. So those are people leaving an area. So that creates vacancy. So when vacancy goes up, rents typically go down. The other thing is when there's a lot of new supply being added to a concentrated area. So you see this a lot too. So typically things are zoned, and you might have a lot of multifamily, let's say, dropping in one location where you might have 2,000 or 3,000 units in one small area, and then you're going to have a lot of supply and less demand. So I've seen rents go down when demand goes down.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, thanks for checking us out today, guys and girls. I hope that we helped you understand why rents are skyrocketing, and there's a lot of good advice in there and what you could do about it, whether you are on one side of the coin or the other. Check us out next week, and we'll see you next Monday.
Yeah, see you guys. Cheers.